All right.
Okay, welcome.
Welcome, everyone.
Welcome everyone. Welcome to this community conversation, Land, Lineage and Resisting Genocide with Layla K. Feghali, Taya Shere, and Daniel Foor. My name is Maurizio Benazzo, and I'm speaking today from the unceded territory of coastal Miwok and southern Pomo people.
And my name is Zaya Benatsu, and I'm speaking as well from the Southern Pomo people land and coastal Miwok. And thank you, everyone, for joining us today for this conversation. Over the past 5 months, we have witnessed the daily massive destruction and degradation of life in Gaza and the erasure of a whole society. Death, dismemberment, starvation, and hunger are now everywhere in Gaza. Over 12 children have died directly from starvation as Israel continues to block essential food and medicine aid. And if immediate ceasefire doesn't happen, it's going to be much worse. No hospitals are left, no schools are left, no universities are left. We have watched the erasure of places of worship, mosques, ancient churches. Israel has targeted museums, cultural centers, libraries. Any place that has records of people's lives has remnants and traces of their roots in the land has been intentionally wiped away. Genocide is not just mass murder, but is also the intentional erasure of whole society. What we hear and see daily is dystopic, is incomprehensible, it's heart-wrenching. The Palestinian writer Susan Abdullah, that just returned from Gaza, says language is inadequate to describe the horrors in Gaza. And that all is happening is Western media is continuing to tell us that Israel is targeting Hamas. They're not. This has been about displacing Palestinian people, taking their place and wiping them off the map. What is happening in Gaza now, it has happened in 1948, in 1967, and every new Nakba, every new escalation is greater than the one before. And here we are today at the moment of genocide. And that is because the world has allowed Israel to act for decades with such cruelty, with impunity.
Thank you. And our guests today are Layla Feghali, who is an ethnobotanist, cultural worker, and author who lives between her ancestral village in Lebanon and their diasporic home in California. A recent book, The Land in Our Bones, documents cultural, herbal, and healing knowledge from Syria to the Sinai, while interrogating colonialism and its lingering wound on the culture of our displaced world.
Okay.
Taya Shere is a ritual artist embracing embodied earth-honoring devotion as liberatory spiritual practice. She serves as a professor at Star King School for the Ministry and co-waves a Jewish and Sufi Muslim multi-religious community committed to counter-oppressive spiritual practice. Teyama hosts the acclaimed Jewish Ancestral Healing podcast. Last but not least, Daniel Foor, a doctor of psychology, experienced ritualist, and the author of Ancestral Medicine, Rituals for Personal and Family Healing. He is a practicing Muslim and initiated in the Orisha tradition of Yoruba-speaking West Africa. Thank you. The three of them will offer first some teaching and practice, and then we will move into a conversational space, Q&A space with each and every one of you in the community. Thank you.
Welcome, Layla. Welcome, Tia. Welcome, Daniel. And Daniel would like to invite you to begin with the offering, with a prayer.
Thanks so much, Zaya, Mauricio. Thanks, Taya, Layla, and everybody for your trust and for being here. Yeah, I'd like to begin with a prayer. And it feels right in this context for that prayer to include Surat al-Fatiha as opening surah of the Quran. And with that, an invitation for heart openness and also a prayer for the safe passage and well-being for those returning home and for also a breakthrough for peace and a ceasefire. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين. Give praise and acknowledgement to the holy mystery within me and within all others. Give acknowledgement and respect to the different lineages and powers represented here and to this land here in Andalusia and Granada and Sur de España and to my own ancestors, and ask that me and the other presenters and anyone else who speaks speak with humility and care, and that this time in some modest way support a breakthrough for a ceasefire, an end to the siege, an end to the occupation, and a rapid increase in humanitarian relief to end the genocide being forced through starvation as well. Amen. So, welcome. One thing that I want to say is that there's nothing we are going to be able to say and do in 90 minutes that can touch the magnitude, really, of what's happening. And so I want to take the pressure off myself personally to try to somehow summarize an unfolding catastrophe. And, but in the next 12 minutes, I want to situate myself a little bit and then speak to different ways that one might engage. What I'm not going to do with my time is try to convince anyone here of the wrongness of what's happening. We're 5 months in. There are ways to get that information. I would encourage engagement directly with Palestinian journalists, bold as they are, and with Al Jazeera and with other historians on colonialism, including the new historians who are Israeli, if that's helpful for you to approach it in that way. There's a lot of ways to get the history of what's really problematic about the occupation and the state of Israel as it exists now. So with that nod to the things that are treated in their due complexity and thoroughness in other places, let me situate myself briefly. So I live in Spain, but I'm an American. I'm a US citizen. And I hold the United States in some ways even more responsible than Israel for what's happening. The United States is being hopefully now tried, or the start of a trial internationally for genocide. I hope the United States is convicted because we're guilty as a nation. And I feel a moral obligation as a US citizen to try to bring light to the way that the United States is driving what's happening and blocking a breakthrough. And I see a lot of Americans that I know and love who really aren't connecting those dots yet still. So there's a lot of work to be done. I'm speaking as an American in that way first. Two, I'm speaking as a dad. I have two young girls in our home here. I was watching a video today of some acutely malnourished Gazan children attending a funeral for a baby that starved to death. And someone was recording it, to bring attention to the reality that these kids know and the adults know that they're next. Israel isn't playing with the ceasefire talks. The US is being the awkward, unhelpful person about the air drops or the water port they're going to build or whatever while supplying the bombs. And every day, new children are dying of starvation. That's on me as a US citizen. I pay for that, pay my taxes, so I pay for those children to die. So I have a moral obligation to participate in speaking to it. And I feel it more as a parent. Those could be my kids. I'm a Muslim, but there's not a lot to say about that here because it's not primarily religious conflict. It's a conflict of an almost century-long non-consensual occupation in the mode of settler colonialism in the land that is Palestine, which is a multicultural Christian, Muslim, Jewish, and others identity. But as a Muslim, I'm a little more sensitive to just how much bias toward Islam and bias toward Arab people is at play. Like imagine 2 million Euro or American or Australian or Canadian white people under siege. The response would be very different. So the double standard, it's fundamentally racist about the valuing of certain lives over others, is on full horrific live streamed display. So that's happening. And I'm not Christian myself. I respect the tradition, although I'm not Christian, but my ancestors are. And I want to name the Christian harm and anti-Semitism, Christian persecution of Jewish people, anti-Semitism is historically the biggest driver of what's happening now in many ways. And I say that because if you feel removed from what's happening and you have European Christian ancestors, ancestral engagement is one way to find an in. Christian Zionists have even more political influence than Jewish Zionists in the United States. So especially white evangelical Christian Zionists are anti-Semitic as they are, have a massive role in driving the current genocide, and are not getting much heat for it, frankly. I'm a ritualist. I'm a spiritual teacher by trade. I don't see as many other spiritual teachers speaking to things as I would like to, but it's not a topic I'm going to say a lot more about here. Besides that, staying neutral in a time of genocide is not spiritual. It's cowardly. The way of engaging might look different for different people, but to act as if it's wise to not get involved, I don't know. I've studied religion for 20, 30 years. I have a degree in that. I don't know of any tradition that says that. That's garbage. So whatever your traditions are, they should have some encouraging way to engage in justice on earth. And just to name that what's happening is destructive to the earth directly. And it's not only the humans that suffer when the humans go to war with one another. So that. But let me name, so I say that just to situate like my identities, I guess. But at the end of the day, like I'm a sensitive human being, like I assume most of you. And so what's happening is horrific. If you can get through the media bias to actually get the story, it's horrific. So what do we do? There's not just one thing to do, but engage somehow. So I'll name a half dozen things briefly, very broad things. The first is tangible activism. And in my mind, this is the primary thing that's in most ways more important than everything else. It's stopping the ongoing killing. So through protests, through maybe calling or leveraging or pressuring your politicians that you have access to, boycotting companies that profit off the occupation, investing in Palestinian causes and businesses, sending humanitarian relief perhaps, but that doesn't immediately stop it. But resistance fighting, like for those who are on the ground doing the direct resistance work, this is, if this succeeds, that's the goal. That's the outcome, is actually stopping the fresh killing. So everyone who's doing that, I end up comparing myself to them and feeling like I'm doing less important things. It doesn't value. It's not that what we're doing isn't valuable. It is, but if you have the option between doing something tangible like that, or only doing spiritual practices per se, make sure to do the tangible thing. Really. There's no substitute for stopping the killing. That's the like gold standard of what to do. Stop it. Stop the killing. Okay. Obviously. Two is focus on actually helping those who are being harmed through humanitarian relief. There's a strange thing happening with the sound. Is that I think it's stopped happening now. Okay. Um, try to do what you can, although much of the aid is blocked, not all of it is. I know something Layla can speak to as well. But trying to assist those who are directly impacted is also sacred, is also a tangible way of engaging. I'm going to move a little quick through these because I want to honor the balance of time. A third is to try to prevent the spread of the ideology that causes this kind of problem. Zionism, perhaps not in its initial ideas, but definitely in what it's become and its enactment, is a form of supremacy. And it is toxic in its manifestation. And so learning how to disentangle that from Judaism and how to name it for what it is, that kind of education, I see it's a little bit what we're doing here, but getting educated about stuff, helping others who are not already educated to do that, it's tedious work, but it's work for the long haul to try to stop what's happening from spreading, because there's no guarantee that things get any better in the next year, 5 or 10 years. I remember, months ago, it's like, well, 10,000 people have died. There must be an end coming. And now we're at 30,000. Now we're deepening into famine. Ceasefire is broken down. The United States is no closer to intervening in any real way. So I don't see the breaks yet. Fourth thing is to try to help those who are experiencing possession states from the predatory energies driving the genocide to break free from that. I see this as especially applying to people patiently, lovingly, trying to psychologically and energetically disentangle people from Zionism and from the cultural conditioning of that. It's over 2/3 of Israeli society in a recent survey said they support the blockade of aid, humanitarian aid to Gaza. That indicates a real cultural level, multi-generational dehumanization campaign. And people can break free of that. Helping people to do that, if that's your calling, is sacred work. A fifth thing is going directly to war spiritually with the predatory energies behind things. That's beyond the scope of this chat. It's not something that I personally undertake, but some people do that. It's an option, and it is very real that there are forces behind the human killing and the war and the atrocities that feed off those energies. If your spiritual tradition, whatever it is, doesn't have a category for evil, it's missing something, no matter how you frame it. Like, there are such forces. So how we relate with them is a relevant question when they have been invited to walk the earth. And a final thing, and then I'll hand it off to Taya, is allow what's happening, if this isn't already true for you, and it may be for many of you, to cause you to like pin your heart open and be like, wow, this is so awful. I know I can't do all of it right now. I know I only have control over so many things, but I commit in the long haul to a just world, to ending colonialism, to to being a participant in the correction of these major historical harms. And that might mean leveling up spiritually, professionally, cleaning your relational house up, whatever it is, but let it be a catalyst for your life to reorganize and to prioritize these kinds of things and figure out your way of contributing, because we each have our own destiny and our own way that we can participate. So I'll end by saying that your particular contributions, whatever they might be, they matter. If they don't feel like enough, I think almost everybody sits with that. but they matter. And in mass, they lead to actual change. So thanks for being here. Thanks for hearing that. And Taya, yeah.
From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. This incantation for liberation is an affirmation of Palestinian right of return and a call for an end to the Israeli occupation of Palestine. And it carries a call for immediate and permanent ceasefire and abundant aid in Gaza and beyond. I offer this incantation as a person of Jewish heritage divested from Zionism. It is not a call, as some say, for genocide, but rather one to end genocide and occupation, and a call for Palestinian sovereignty on their lands. I offer it too as a call through sacred waters, from the waters in our bodies and the healthy waters where we are and around the world to the River Jordan, the Mediterranean Sea, and the waters in Gaza. I come to this time of devastation and to this conversation on land, lineage, and resisting genocide from over 2 decades of devoting to reclaim Judaism from the systemic oppressions which have shaped it and which it has shaped. I've particularly devoted to reclaiming and innovating embodied, earth-based Jewish ways of practice, prayer, and spiritual leadership. And I come to this conversation from a depth of commitment to transform collective Jewish PTSD toward shifting the Jewish cultural nervous system from a state of hypervigilance and survive to one of thrive. I've understood that to transform trauma, we must build capacity to root in positive resource in the body, in the energy body, in the community body, in the ancestral body. For the decades that I've been amidst this work, I've wholeheartedly believed that cultivating resilience and anchoring blessing could be a potent enough pathway to create a transformed and liberatory Judaism. I divested from Zionism years ago after experiences guiding trips in occupied Palestine, and in the time since, I've been crafting ritual in anti-Zionist spaces and co-create Jewish and Muslim counter-oppressive multi-religious community. And all this time, I have still believed that the Jewish project as distinct from and divested from Zionism is redeemable, that Judaism could be reclaimed from Zionism and the other systemic oppressions that have tainted it so deeply and that it has anchored. I imagined that the collective Jewish nervous system and ancestral field would butterfly effect into wholeness if enough of us who have been impacted did enough of the work. Yet it has become clear in the wake of October 7th and in the face of continually escalating genocide, militarily enforced starvation, and ethnic cleansing in Gaza and in Palestine, that reclaiming Judaism from Zionism is nowhere near enough. If our Judaism is not actively being engaged to dismantle Zionism and to liberate Palestine, its practice, its theology, its traditions, and its preservation are no longer relevant, at least to me. If our Jewish practice, or if any of our spiritual practices are not leading us toward collective liberation, let us compost them to make space for decolonial, liberatory, and truly life-loving ways. May we be curious about what becomes possible when we embrace resonant rituals of resistance, through which we divest from Zionism, yes, and also from incongruence, contortion, and complacency in the face of systemic oppressions, empire, and white supremacy. How we place our devotion of attention shapes us. Being willing to disrupt our default ways is essential to creating meaningful change and living a more values-aligned life. I'm grateful for this invitation to share a bit about my practice with you here, not because I presume it holds the right way for you, but with hope that it may offer invitation, permission, or a spark toward your own dismantling and deepening. These days, since October, I've been consciously disconnecting from the Jewish ways of marking time that have been etched in my internal calendar for as long as I can remember. This past December, when Hanukkah came around, Gaza had gone dark. Rather than working to reclaim the holiday from its militaristic origins, rather than celebrating light amidst devastation, I too sat in the dark in vigil for each of Hanukkah's 8 nights. And 6 weeks later, when Tu B'Shvat, the Jewish New Year of the trees, arrived amidst olive trees and every other kind of tree in Gaza actively being destroyed, and with Gazans amidst systemic starvation, on this holiday night I could not celebrate in community by feasting on sacred fruits, even if the offering was shaped in a decolonial anti-Zionist frame. All there was to do was to weep alone under the swollen moon. While my ways of reckoning with religious ritual are rooted in resistance, that does not keep me from the sacred. Rather, it is bringing me more deeply to it and to relationships with the waters, with the earth, with the more than human world and creature teachers which hold me, which hold us. Earth-based practice has always been my home zone, yet in this time it's become additionally central, necessary, and pronounced, much more so, even and especially than my ancestral tendings. In the aftermath of October 7th, I found myself unable to teach and practice the work of Jewish ancestral healing as I had before. While I've supported countless folks whose lineages are thick with Holocaust trauma to unstick from that density and attune to abundant blessing in their lines, amidst escalating genocide in Gaza, an incoherence I'd experienced as mostly dormant in the Jewish ancestral field came roaring to the surface with a fierceness that ripples and expands still. Fragmentation, fracture, and extreme distress spiked off the charts, and it became immediately and clearly unstable and unwise, in my experience, to touch the ancestral field that had been a home zone for my own practice and that I guided many hundreds into regularly. At first, I was afraid to speak of this. I was afraid of what was happening. Folks kept reaching out for help, working with their ancestors, and every single time I turned within, every time I tuned in, the guidance was the same. Don't go directly to your people. The field is fucked. The field is too fragmented. We can't work in the way we have before. Instead, I felt a clear call to work at the foundations, to welcome guidance from the deep, more fully embracing support available from the elements, the creature teachers, and our more than human kin, attuning to the ancient web of wisdom and blessing. This has been what is sustaining me and those I support in these times. My only other embodied experience of the ancestral field being so radically incoherent is when I was on the ground in Auschwitz-Birkenau serving as Jewish clergy for multi-faith ceremony of bearing witness. Despite decades of cultivating capacity for resourced presence in the face of extreme trauma, despite being surrounded by immense ancestral support, despite it being over 75 years since genocide occurred on that land, in most moments as I was leading during my week there, I could barely stay standing. Bringing presence to my body or to the earth generated what felt like a lightning bolt, shattering every single thing in me. There were just 2 moments in Auschwitz-Birkenau in which I experienced a palpable sense of healing possibility. The first was when Karim, a Palestinian friend, guided us in recitation of his Arabic translation of the Mourner's Kaddish, the Jewish prayer of ancestralization which we incant to elevate the souls of our beloved dead. Karim's Arabic Kaddish scented the stagnant air with a fragrance of possibility and a poignant awareness of interdependence amidst devastation. Days later, in our closing ritual, we gathered around the ash pond, understood to hold the remains of 1 million murdered. With no way to metabolize or well meet the magnitude of that moment and utterly wrung out from grief, we placed rose petal after rose petal along the surface of the water. The 90 of us joined hands and encircled the pond, singing of hope and healing. Our beauty offering was met by rays of sun shimmering over the surface of the water, and that moment pulsed with possibility, the transmutation of trauma, and the power of collective tending, bearing witness, and embodied prayer. Now, in this time, amidst the atrocity and trauma of that Holocaust being weaponized to perpetrate genocide and ethnic cleansing in Gaza, I often return in my mind's eye to the ash pond, seeking to glean even a strand of wisdom from that bearing witness to bring toward halting the horrors that Israel, the US, and more are committing right now, as we are sitting here, right now in Palestine. One night this past fall, in which the news was becoming more and more horrific as it continues to today, I had no idea what else to do. I was tending in the movement for ceasefire. I was convening prayer gatherings, contributing through mutual aid, and speaking in spiritual spaces for a liberated Palestine and against the occupation and genocide in ways that I prayed were permission-giving to those still waking up. And still none of it felt like enough. Still today, none of it feels like enough. Amidst a growing sense of despair and dismantle, and while continuing to take aligned action in the myriad ways within my reach, I began to pray in ways that are more deep and more true for me. I brought the waters of my body to the sea. I let myself feel the tears from my eyes, and the waters in my fluid body as connected to the water which pours from my faucet, as connected to the rain falling from the sky, knowing that the waters of this world cycle continuously as they have for 3.8 billion years, knowing that water is a portal for and a pathway of connection, knowing that the water in and near me is not separate from the water in Gaza. I asked the water to please carry my prayer for a safe and sovereign Palestine. And I let myself lean more fully into the power of resonant voice. I chant to root myself when the horrors I witness through my news feed become too debilitating to engage, when bearing witness becomes overwhelming. I chant to root myself and my prayer. Incantation becomes the backdrop of my days and nights, one way of many ways to seed liberation. The devastation of this time is both changing and clarifying me, along with so many. Perhaps also it is changing and clarifying you. Working for an end to genocide and occupation is not about rhetoric. It calls for both our action and our embodied practice. It asks us to align our faith and our values with our actions, even and especially if we must do things differently from how we've done them before. As we're called more deeply into our existing capacities, we are simultaneously called to cultivate new ways and new forms, to embrace yet greater dedication and creativity in engaging toward collective and particularly Palestinian liberation. I don't presume that my practices will be the same as yours, yet I share from mine as one blueprint, one invitation, with a blessing for you as you find and hone your particular ways. May your gifts and your presence be of service. May what you carry and what you have cultivated well meet what is most needed now. And may your devotions be divested from what is not whole. As you engage and practice, as you devote toward collective liberation, toward an end to an occupation of Palestine, to an end immediately to genocide in Gaza, feel so welcome to chant with me. From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. May this violence, may all violence cease. Let Gaza live and thrive in peace. May this violence, may all violence cease. Let Gaza live and thrive in peace. May it be so swiftly. May it be so fully. May it be so now. It is my honor to welcome with us Layla K. Feghali, author of The Land in Our Bones, Earth-Based Pathways to Ancestral Stewardship and Belonging in Diaspora, whose work has been such an inspiration to me. So grateful, Layla, for your presence here. So welcoming your words.
Thank you so much, Taya. Thank you for your song and for your connection to the waters. And hi, I'm Layla. I'm speaking to you right now from my diasporic home on Tongva Tataviam territories in Southern California. Oftentimes, I also live in my ancestral village on the coast of Lebanon, whose waters are just 200 miles away from Gaza's, the same sea, the same waters. And I too found myself in October 7th while I was there, really feeling the call and the heed from the land and the waters to just deepen and drop in to the memory, the possibilities, and also the resistance that lives within our intimacy with source, with land, with the elements. And I feel called to talk about fire. 2 weeks ago, or maybe a couple more than that now, I don't know, time is blurring, 25-year-old Aaron Bushnell, an active Air Force duty member, set himself on fire in front of the Israeli embassy, chanting "Free Palestine." And before he martyred himself in this ritual of fire, he said in very clear words, "I'm about to engage in an extreme act of protest, but compared to what people have been experiencing in Palestine at the hands of their colonizers, it is not extreme at all. This is what our ruling classes decided will be normal." His act, harrowing and intense as it was, moved me deeply. It touched me, and I felt it rippling through with a very strong and clear message. He, in his army fatigues, a symbol of empire, a symbol of American empire, a symbol of being an agent of American empire, set himself to fire, sacrificed his life in order to refuse complicity, in order to say, my body is no more valuable and no more important than the many bodies burned in Gaza every day. That my martyrhood is no less possible, is no less real, because I refuse to be complicit in what our government, what our state, and what he as an agent of the military that is bombing Gazans every single day represented. Aaron Bushnell's act really beckons a reckoning for everyone who saw, who witnessed, who felt. What are we willing to sacrifice? What will we allow to be normal? What are the ways that we are complicit every single day beyond our direct actions, simply by virtue of being here? I'm assuming most of the people here are from North America, from places complicit despite ourselves. And I feel like it's important for us to reckon with the very real implications of that. We live in the belly of the empire that is perpetuating all of this violence. We live at the source of the illness, which, yes, gives us a moral responsibility to reckon with, but it also positions us in a very particular way to see ourselves as part of a proactive resistance. We who live at the source of the wound understand its nature the best. At the source of the illness, sorry. We understand its nature best. We are the ones positioned to reckon with its realities. We are charged with the task of choosing what are we willing to sacrifice and what will we allow to become normal in our realities, the realities that we are creating. Aaron Bushnell's act insists that this is not a time to look away, that you may choose to look away, but the truth is looking away is complicity. And we are being asked to pick up our agency, to find the resistance inside of ourselves, to see ourselves as part of a thriving resistance. What will we allow to become normal? Will we allow the life-desecrating forces of empire to be our normalcy? Aaron Bushnell's martyrdom evoked for me immediately the tradition of hundreds of Buddhist monks who similarly martyred themselves in rituals of fire in order to protest for a free Tibet, the many who did so during the Vietnam War, the other martyr whose name I still have not been able to find, who also martyred herself several weeks ago here in the United States for a free Palestine. But this tradition really is anchored in the Buddhist tradition. It has been part of the Buddhist monks, you know, ways of resistance and devotion even. And I know that that's a very controversial and uncomfortable thing to say. It's a very intense thing to come to that. But it's been part of these spiritual traditions, and it evokes for me immediately the many, many, many examples of spiritualists, of healers across the earth, across time, who have proactively understood their position as spiritualists, as healers, to be in a proactive relationship of resistance alongside their people, fighting for political liberation, against colonization, against occupation, against empire in so many expressions. Harriet Tubman dreamed the Underground Railroad. It was through her spiritual practice, her knowing the land as an herbalist, that she was able to access this part of her spirit that allowed her to usher her people into pathways, literal pathways to freedom. Saint Teresita Urrea was a Yaqui saint, a Catholic saint, who I believe was imprisoned at some point because of her support towards the indigenous resistance because of against colonization of the Spaniards. There have been people all across history. There were African, West African Yoruba elders. The Babalawo Achedina was a Yoruba elder who voluntarily took himself, a priest of the Ifa tradition, who voluntarily took himself through the transatlantic slave trade in order to be of service, of spiritual service to his people enduring the most unfathomable enslavement. Jesus, of course, our Palestinian Jewish resistor, probably the most famous in the world, who was martyred at the hands of empire because of his refusal to look away, because of his refusal to abandon those who would be marginalized and terrorized at its hands. What has happened to the spiritual traditions that we say we are part of the lineages of? I say we, but to be honest, I don't mean all of us. I'm just going to say, like, I don't mean all of us, but I am speaking into the Western spiritual communities and our still grappling, so many people's continuing to grapple with understanding the direct connection and the direct implication of our responsibilities as spiritualists, as healers towards political liberation. At the heart and essence of all of our traditions, wherever they may come from, there are laws that come from life, from land. We say they come from the divine, but they are laws that we have learned through the earth, through understanding the balance of life and the harmony that is required in order and needs to be adhered in order for things to be well. With our ancestors, with our, fellow people, with our communities, the foundational universal values of most spiritual traditions rests with those laws and protocols that ensure that life will be affirmed and continued. This is a spiritual test. We are in a spiritual test. This is a spiritual war as much as it is a material one. And, people say as above, so below. Well, it goes the same. How we are interfacing with the physical realities of this moment, the ways that we are leveraging our daily energy are either making us complicit with life's desecration or helping us to affirm and insist in the spirit of resistance on the affirmation of life and systems that will ensure it be so. And that is the battle that we are in right now. Palestine is a spiritual threshold that is not just about Palestine, but it happens to be about Palestine right now. This is as much a spiritual test as it is a threshold into the birth of worlds that will, inshallah, hopefully, God willing, that can undo so much of the harm and tip the scales. I feel like it's a Harry Potter moment, and I know that seems corny, but is this that Harry Potter episode where the Death Eaters are taking over and they're so prevalent on the earth that we don't even realize that we ourselves have become them, that we ourselves are under their hypnosis? Or is this the episode where we proactively resist and we create a threshold that is life affirming? This is the time where all your spiritual culminations for all your lifetime, this is what they're for. You have been cultivating these spiritual practices for a lifetime so that you could be equipped to respond to this moment on earth as a human. If you find yourself feeling shut down, avoidant, unable to engage, it is a time to ask yourself where those traditions have led you and to really confront inside yourself if you're able to use those tools, because this is what they are for. This is the spiritual threshold. This is the spiritual test. And we reassert our position in it through every ounce of energy that we delegate in every moment of this time. There's a million ways to use your energy that can affirm life in very practical ways. And I truly believe that if we want to talk about intimacy with land and lineage many of us who live on unceded territories of other indigenous peoples who still to this day fight against settler colonialism, we who have been living within the intimate, I don't know, indoctrination of settler colonialism and hopefully working towards unraveling it in ourselves, that intimacy, our knowing the land, just like the guerrilla fighters in Gaza know their land so well that they are able to resist the largest militaries in the world with not even a real army, all because of their intimacy with their place. Our intimacy with land means that we, as people living in the belly of empire, need to become really intimate with how empire functions, what the illness looks like, how it propels itself, how we ourselves are used as agents to propel it, and study those things as part of strategies for resistance, because what we know about how it propels itself is what guides our ability to honestly strike where it's weak. It is our responsibility to do that in whatever ways we can. And if you don't want to get into the nitty-gritty of the political resistance that is required and the possibilities, as we are literally part of the frontline resistance, one thing that we can do at the very least is take agency back around how we use our own resources and our energy every day. Our money is a resource, our relationships are a resource, our safety is a resource, our spiritual practices and healing practices are a resource, our social media is a resource, all the energy that we put in every day. And so every single life in Gaza is precious. Every single one is precious. Every time we protect in any tangible way life to persist, we are affirming in some tiny way that we refuse to be complicit and that we are trying to tip the scales towards life. I want to just say that we also have an obligation to divest our resources, like Daniel mentioned, from the sources that are complicit in desecration of life and in militarized action. And we also have the agency to reinvest and redistribute our very material resources towards the people of Gaza, towards the places that need it, towards the places which colonialism has intentionally extracted wealth and life from for hundreds and hundreds of years as part of a legacy that they make us complicit in just by virtue of benefiting from being part of this empire. So I want to say that here, as this group, I don't know how many people are on this call right now, but one thing that I would like to encourage as a very practical way for us in this small but big way to support and to defend and to feed the livelihood of people of Gaza is that we know that humanitarian aid is not getting in. Mutual aid is extremely critical right now, exactly for that reason. It's very difficult for NGOs to reimburse cash and do things, and it takes a long time for their money to get on the ground. But we have large diasporas. Palestinians are our neighbors and our siblings. Their families are the ones who are experiencing war. People of South Lebanon too, I have to say, because that's close to my own heart too. All of our peoples who are under the bombs of the Zionists, we are right here. We are your neighbors. We have families. We find our resource ways of getting money on the ground. And I would like to request as an action that we take with each other that we commit to completing the fundraisers of these 3 families that are trying to make money simply to live, because we know every life is precious. If we can help these 3 families collectively through our resources, what are we willing to sacrifice? What money do we have that we can sacrifice? What relationships can we call in? What resources are we able to harness towards efforts to complete the fundraisers of Amina, who Zaya and Mauricio, they have put the link on there. My friend Ahmad and this other family, I think, let's see if these are in the chat already. Lisa, would you mind putting these 3 in the chat? I feel like redistributing wealth is one very practical thing we can do. And I feel like in a group this big, we can do that. By the end of this week, can we commit to making sure that these families have enough money to protect these lives for a possibility? Can we do that? Charge that as a ritual of our devotion? Can that be our prayer as we continue to invest in, really studying empire, studying the communities we live in and the ways that we're able to resist the more systemic forces at hand? Can we redistribute our immediate resources? Every step we take to reclaim agency reinforces our spiritual ability to push back these forces. Every single tiny thing we do reinforces the possibility of this. So Muhammad al-Kurd, a resident of Jerusalem, says, there, they are subjected to a genocide. Here, we are at war, and we all have an active role to play. And my charge is, how do we use the culmination of our resources of a lifetime, our spiritual traditions, our efforts, our agency in every way we are able to leverage it, to look towards and to reaffirm life in the practical ways that we can? This empire is ours to dismantle. It's ours. It is not there, it is here. How do we take that on? How do we honor the ancestors of lineages, our lineages all over the world, whose resistance to these atrocities has allowed us to even know these traditions at all, has allowed us to be here? All these parts of our own lineages, all these parts of our own legacies. How do we honor that? How do we find our agency? What are the resources that we are using in every moment to affirm life and the systems that will dignify and sanctify it, and to resist those that are in very real ways trying to diminish it? So that is my, yeah, I want to see commitments from folks though. Can we do this? Can we actually take on in some way an agreement that by the end of the week, these 3 GoFundMes, between all of our resources, all the people we know, all of our networks, will be completed? That these families, just 3, there are hundreds. Can we commit to these 3 families? I want like active, I need you all to respond. I want to see your emojis or whatever it is. Like I'm asking for an actual commitment. This might mean that you take on a small fundraiser in your community to collect those funds, or you email all the people you know, or your kids sell lemonade. I don't know what it is. This is an invitation for us to thank you for all the hands. It's an invitation for us to invest our creative resources, our relational resources, our energy and effort towards thinking through ways that we can resist, and ways that at the very least, if we cannot resist, that we can support and ensure that the lives, as many lives as possible, are protected. Thank you. And that's all. My simple, humble, suggestion for the moment.
Thank you, Layla. Yeah. I'd like for just a few to invite a guided practice or an embodied moment before we open it up for a little bit of questions and discussion. And before even doing that, I just want to reaffirm that there's not a singular correct way to engage. It's not a competition about who's going to be the most correct in how to engage. What's happening is a severe manifestation of dynamics that all of us have been born into and that will outlive us. That said, let's bring what we've been speaking to a bit of direct listening and presence. So if you would, I'll talk you through a thing for less than 10 minutes, but begin just by noticing your body, your heart, your belly, your feet. Like, be present in your physical space if you're not already. And notice whatever powers you already trust, your guides, your ancestors, the deities, God directly, the earth, love, whatever it is, attune to the greater if you can find it. And from that place of felt connection, hold intent that your personal space be clear or free from negativity, interference, anything that's not you, anything you don't need to be carrying with you right now. And finally, hold intent that there's just a layer of protection around your personal space. Honor your personal boundaries. And from that place of being rooted in your body, connected, clear, protected, take a minute to just listen to your own guidance. What from what's been said lands? What about the larger disaster and genocide? Where does it intersect your specific destiny in life today? Take a minute of just listening. If you can, from that place, if it's not already available, see if you can notice what about the larger situation really reaches your heart and allow for that to be present. There's a lot of thoughts and opinions and things to do and not do and feelings that move through, but what's the place of real empathy? Are you hurt for what's happening? And see if you can just make space for it. That'll Maybe that feeling, if it's present for you, translates into a prayer, translates into a directing of will and intent and desire, that there be a breakthrough, that there be more justice, to be a reduction in suffering. So let that happen if that's possible. Might not be your moment, but in doing that, you're joining millions and millions of other living humans, many among the mighty dead, and many other benevolent forces who are working for that outcome. So see if you can actually notice that you're not alone in your caring. It's a fucking mess and volatile. And there's also a lot of love and care on the move as well. So just find your way to entrain with that a little bit. From that place of connectedness and care, and remembering that your particular contributions matter, be curious with your own guidance, your guides, your inner knowing. Is there one tangible thing, one concrete thing that's within reach for you, something that you can do that you haven't already done, something you could resume as a practice, some kind of tangible act to shift the balance? Perhaps it's contributing, as Layla encouraged. Perhaps it's that and something else, but bring it to your guidance, not only your rational mind. What do the powers that you trust advise? Transition out of practice and in just a moment here, but as and honor whatever you're noticing or feeling. And as we head into a space for a bit more dialogue or discussion, see if you can still notice that collective field of care and energy and responsiveness. That you not only can be nourished by that, but you add to it. Effective movement work requires tolerating differences to collaborate towards shared outcomes. You don't have to be just like everybody else who cares, but that you care and that you engage, it matters a great deal. Thanks. And we'll open it up for, let me, pass it to Mauricio and Zaya.
Thank you, Daniel. Thank you, Layla, Taya, for this rich, deeply moving, deeply embodied sharings and pointers. We are over time, so just acknowledge that this will be recorded. So if you have to leave, we'll be sharing the recording with everyone, and you can catch up. And the three presenters have gracefully agreed to stay a little bit over time so we can address a couple of questions. The way we will do the question is please type your question in the Q&A box and we will read them. or the speakers will read them. Stacy, can you bring Daniel, Layla, and Taya so we are all in a group together? Yes, thank you. Any of you feels compelled to address any of the questions, or shall we just read them? Hold on, you're muted.
Well,
Yeah, you're muted.
there's one I could speak to, but I'm happy to if you wanted to, or Layla, however.
I'll speak after you, Daniel.
Well, somebody says, I perceive the feeling of not doing enough is often projected outward, creating both a hierarchy among those already engaged and some kind of duality between those perceived to be engaged with those who are not. I struggle with this dynamic. Any thoughts? I can give my very short answer, which is like, you're not going to do enough. There's not until it's all stopped and all the suffering for all beings through all the worlds has ended, you're not doing enough. Simultaneously true is like, we're whole. It's already okay on some other very deeply true level. And so both of those things feel true. Beyond that, I hear I think it's Motaz, a Palestinian journalist, like lamenting not doing enough. I'm like, oh my God, bro, like you're doing so much. How can you say that? But so who's doing enough? I'm definitely not doing enough. And the individualistic, competitive, divisive kind of vibe within movement culture that creeps in sometimes is really off-putting and can be discouraging and unhelpful. So when that vibe is on the move, I think we just try to not pick it up and be like, someone's having a hard day and being unkind and divisive. But I don't know. It's not like a competition who gets to be the biggest savior. That's not what we're doing here. Yeah. Yeah.
I'll add a layer here and then turn to a question directed at me. To the question Daniel was just speaking to, in affirmation of what Daniel says, and also I'd like to add something about urgency culture, which is when we're steeped in a sea of trauma, we're often in false urgency, in hypervigilance, to a degree that it makes it less possible and has us less available for real urgency when it occurs. And I feel like there are ways that in which white supremacy culture has anchored urgency as a way. And what I'm finding is in this moment, when we're actually amidst an urgent situation, when people are being murdered every single day, there's a confusion sometimes for folks who have been in a state of hypervigilance of how to discern. And I don't have the answer. As Daniel said, many of the folks I know who are doing the most are the ones who feel like they're not doing enough. What I've found is that being in community and trusting that we are tapping in when others need to tap out, and letting ourselves show up together and understand that none of us can do this alone. It's not possible. And continuing to lean into community, and as Layla was saying so powerfully, finding our agency everywhere we can, understanding that each act we take that makes a difference shifts something, and continuing to let ourselves feel our agency in tandem with whatever feelings of helplessness we also have is really important in staying resourced. There's a question also for me that I'll speak to briefly from Eileen. When you chant from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, do you mean that there should no longer be an Israel, a land for Jews as well as Palestinians? Please clarify. I'll say just briefly here, when I chant from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, I'm drawing on multiple ways of understanding it. I'm moved by the Honorable Rashida Tlaib's framing of this. From the river to the sea is an aspirational call for freedom, human rights, and peaceful coexistence. Also, Fatima writes, a dreaming, this phrase is a dreaming in which nobody subjugates anybody, nobody dominates anybody, nobody colonizes anybody. And for me, that is at the heart of this call. The call for Palestinian people to be sovereign in their lands. And given how things are unfolding for me personally, Jews' place in the land is secondary. And I am not holding that Jews cannot be on these lands. I'm holding that there needs to be equality and sovereignty and rights for all people in this land. And so I won't go into the various solutions of what that can look like, because that needs to be determined by the folks who are at greatest impact. But I appreciate the question, and I hope that clarifies a little bit. And I'm excited, Layla, to hear your response to the next question. I think it's a really juicy one.
Yeah. I can read the question if it's easier, Layla. So,
I just saw the stack of questions and I didn't assume that I was next, but sure, I
okay,
can
I
the
can read
question. Oh
from
yeah,
Raju.
go
Raju?
ahead. Uh-huh.
Yeah. How can the future be envisioned when the past is flooding our senses?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this question, I can't say that I have like a definite answer, but I do want to just say that I feel very present in the ongoing reckoning with this question and with this reality, and seeing how present that is. And right now it's kind of, I've said on other talks, the wound is open, the blood is gushing, and sometimes we need to stop the bleeding before we can heal and heal the scar tissue and tend the scar and the wound. But I personally find that being with communities of shared, I mean, for me, I don't know, Raju, where you're from and what past is flooding your senses, as I know that many of us might relate to that experience from different positionalities. I know for me that being around communities who come from Bilad Sham or the Levant lately has been a very important lifeline to being able to be settle into the space that allows us to access visioning futures together, that it doesn't have to happen alone. I know that anchoring into the land and the elements, for me, part of the reason that has been such a pivotal practice is because the land connects us to the past, the future, and the present all at once. It allows us to, or it invites us back into the body of this moment without bypassing the pain that exists in the moments that preceded it. And in my hope, or in my cultivation, that truly attuning to the land in moments of struggle and kind of loss of vision, or an inability to see beyond or feel beyond just the utter terror of this moment and all that it carries, allows me to, I hope, tap into like a deeper knowing forward and a possibility that is emergent. So it's not necessarily like there's this clear, the future is being made. We're in this liminal moment where everything is changing. There is no way for us not to feel that everything about who we were before this moment has changed, and who we are after feels suspended. I feel like that's just part of the dance that we're kind of navigating. And so I personally lean into the communities I know I can trust and attune to, and the land and the elements as a place of resourcing myself enough and attuning towards possibilities forward. I I also just want to speak really briefly to the not doing enough thing. I don't think it matters, honestly. Like, I feel like the not are we doing enough thing really comes back to how we're evaluating what's happening. But I don't know that that's the right question right now. I think just like doing what we are able to do. And if we're honest with ourselves about if we are doing what we personally are able to do, then if it's enough or not is probably not the right question. I do see Yeye Luisa Tish, my beloved dear elder and friend, and I would like to invite her to actually speak into this space. And Yeye, maybe even offer your wisdom. It's an honor to have you here with us.
Thank you. I want to begin by saying Alafia. And in that greeting, I'm asking that we have good health and be at peace with our neighbors. And while this is a good blessing every day, it is especially important at this time. In the Ifa tradition, we do a reading every year to ask the ancestors and the forces of nature to guide us in what is coming and how we should conduct ourselves. And we are warned that all over the world, he wears a crown with the brain of a child, okay? So the problem is we have leaders in positions of authority who are immature, okay? They do not understand their place in nature and think that it is all right to commit genocide, to reinvent slavery, to make a claim of a hierarchy of human value, which is insane, okay? And the problem is they are not paying attention to Mother Earth's response to their actions, you know. So we, each one of us, have to pay attention to what part of nature we are attuned to, okay, and do our spiritual work through them, okay? Global food security is my issue. When I see a hungry child in Palestine, in Sudan, in Haiti, my breasts hurt, okay? And I have to feed somebody. I have to do something about that. So your guidance around what you do and how much you do is not an intellectual abstraction. It is something that is close to your heart. It is connected to what your ancestors are saying to you. It is connected to how nature is responding. And when I know that today I have fed somebody in Gaza, somebody in Haiti, somebody in Hawaii, somebody somewhere, then I can feel without ego that I have followed Spirit's direction. This is the only way to not always feel as if you're at a deficit or always wondering, am I doing the right thing? Follow Spirit's guidance. And if enough of us do that, we will see the difference. Thank you.
And Dubai, yeah. Thanks. Yeah.
Thank you, Yeye.
And I want to apologize. I entered some strange time. We're not out of time. We're in our time. So
We're still in our time.
sorry, I was. So Daniel, would you like to address Andy? Shall we bring?
Yeah, I can read the question that came
read the
in, but it's fine for Andy to be live as well. Would you prefer Andy to speak it? I mean,
You
I
will.
said what
Yes,
you
here
wanted.
is Andy. Mhm.
Either way, yeah.
Sure. Hi. Thank
Hey.
you. I'm so grateful for the wisdom that's already been shared today, and I wanted to ask. I've been dealing with. I've been reading A Paradise Built in Hell, which is about crisis response and the sort of the ways that our nervous systems want to respond to crisis versus what's actually effective. And that a lot of us, particularly those in the US, we really like to respond to short-term urgent crises in ways that lets us sort of swoop in and feel like heroes, rather than digging into the long-term, slog of support and building and bringing a new world into being.
Yeah.
And so, I hear people all around me who are talking about, this conflict as though before October 7th, there was nothing happening, and as though there's nothing happening anywhere else in the world.
Sure.
And I don't want to detract from the escalation and the urgency and the energy that is flowing towards trying to end this conflict, but it does seem decontextualized, and it makes me wonder, how can we hold those things? How can we hold that there's stuff that we have to do now on this urgently, and also, we have never lived in a world without war, and we won't live in a world without war if a ceasefire happens in this one.
Yeah. I can try to speak to it a little bit. I mean, I only know how it is for me, I guess, in the sense that when I try to speak out or engage, there's a lot of noise around it. Insofar as some of that happens through social media, which is very important to not mistake for direct, tangible, systemic change work. It has a role, but it's not the same thing. And I know that sometimes there's just like, but there's all these things happening in other places. There absolutely are. And in this moment, I'm placing my attention here to try to leverage something right here. So I think it's okay to be focused on the things that we're close to and still hold the bigger picture. Otherwise, nothing gets appropriate attention. So there's that, and holding the bigger picture while being specific. And then, sorry, I lost my train of thought a little. The thing about the quick response, yeah, like even in this situation, like there's a lot of narratives, at least in the US, about like, oh, this has been going on forever. It's like it hasn't. It's not going on forever. It's a 75-year or 100-year, wherever you place a start date, but not more than 100-year colonialist occupation. And so it's true that it didn't just begin on October 7th, but then it can expand into this like, oh, it's been going on forever. It's this intractable, unsolvable thing. Like, no, it's not that. So, but yeah, to your question, I think that having a spiritual practice of some sort helps with having a sense for different scales of time, that there's a scale of time beyond our life, so we can engage in actions that we won't see the fruits of during our lifetime. I think that it's important that we value the relational acts close at hand in our everyday life as well, and don't make the strange split between like what we're doing in our daily life and then service in the world. Like I take the girls to the protest here in Granada. They're like, no es una guerra, es un genocidio. I'm like, okay, chica, do you know what a genocide is? You're 6 now. We can start to talk about what that means. And so, yeah, I know maybe that's not a very linear response, but I think having a practice of some sort and tending to our relationships will help us to be able to tolerate longer arcs of time, which is part of what I hear you saying is really important. And the narrative on this situation is like, it's not a super long conflict, but 100 years is a really in-between amount of time for someone to hold in their brain. It's a generational conflict. So that's also true. And we're at a moment where it's like, call it a second Nakba or whatever, it's acutely genocidally heightened. Yeah. But yeah, not sure if did that speak, yeah, Layla?
Yeah, I'll speak a little to this, although I have to just say that I come from a very political background, and so I have a whole political answer for you, and I don't think this is necessarily the place to get into that. But I think the reason Palestine is important to me is not, I mean, it's not because it's also my people. I mean, the reason Palestine is significant is because it is this kind of nexus of where empire is kind of like at its most unhinged, we can say. And it's not that this struggle was there first or this one is also there or we need to compete. This is not a competition. Palestine is a threshold. And when we unravel what happens at these kind of important points where empire is doing its work, which also on a spiritual level is true too. I mean, the way that we're watching the genocide happen is very ritualistic. This is not accidental. This is not like without spirit, believe it or not. Like, we want to talk about evil forces and stuff. This is a very ritualistic death that we are observing. And so I think that, being in the kind of rhetoric around, well, we need to talk about this one too, or that one too, they're all connected. And the people who live in these places are not in competition with each other. The people of Sudan and the people of Palestine are understanding that their struggles are connected. The things that existed before this moment, the indigenous people who have been genocided on this continent are understanding how this moment relates to them. It's kind of is this nonlinear thing. And right now, we address this within an understanding that when we unravel systems of oppression, it affects those systems everywhere they operate, not just in this one particular point. I don't know if that, I feel like there was a lot of questions within your question, but that was just a piece that I wanted to speak to. And I'm not sure how helpful it is for, for that to be the focus in some ways of people in the West right now, to be honest, because I'll just be really blunt, as people know that I kind of am. A lot of people are kind of just entering this conversation around Zionism that has been existing for a really long time, and they're just coming onto the scene. And it's really not the ask here is not that everyone become a political expert on Palestine that is able to be the right one to articulate everything about it to all the people around you. I mean, I think that there's so much here that is so basic and so obvious that we can kind of focus on, and being in the direct action of things right now is like maybe the best use of energy, to be honest, and trusting the places, the front lines, honestly, who have been enduring these things actively for so long and just kind of taking the lead. And I don't mean that in a dismissive way, but just that it's so much, I think, to account for everything all the time. And it's a lot to ask of people, or to, I mean, sometimes it does more harm than good for people who have like not really been in the loop. We're not going to be political experts all of a sudden. There are very practical things that we see and we know just on a basic human level are wrong, and we can just kind of try to act there, I think, and not feed too much into the sort of competitive like rhetoric that goes on around it. I don't know if that addresses your question, but it's on my mind. I'm of the spirit these days that like simplifying will take us very far. We don't need to be in the most complex part of the question in order to affect what is happening.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you, Layla. And just, I would invite you, Andy, go visit if you can. Visit the occupied territories. That's the best way to know the reality. And it's not political. And it's not
It is not complex at all.
And it's very simple.
Incredible.
If you can, go visit. That's the way. Thank you so much for your question. And I would like to bring Netta, who has been the forefront of Palestinian fight for liberation for decades. And we just want to honor you, sister, and hear your voice here. Thank you for being with us.
Okay. Oh, I unmuted. So thank you. I just want to, I guess, say I'm not in the forefront. It's the Palestinians that are in the forefront, but I'm in perhaps the forefront of supporting the Palestinians that are resisting doing my best. And I wanted to use this opportunity to extend an invitation. Genocide is happening in Gaza, in the West Bank, where I am right now. I'm speaking to you all from Ramallah. It's an earlier stage, like incremental genocide, but specifically the Bedouin communities in Area C are facing forced displacement. Like there's ongoing efforts to wipe them out, to get them off their land, and 16 communities have already been are gone. And there's a very and they're asking for protective presence of people with privilege. And there's Israeli groups that are mostly in Safriyata and in the Jordan Valley. There's the Jewish Center for Nonviolence, and there's the International Solidarity Movement. People who are internationals, including, anyway, there's all kinds of people who are there responding to that invitation, and their presence, our presence, really makes a difference for these communities to be able to stay on their land, to struggle and be steadfast. So I just wanted to put that out there and invite you all, in addition, of course, to supporting the people in Gaza, and I want to thank SAND actually for all the support that they have been giving, both to help people that are trying to get to safety, and to help people survive and stay there. So thank you. They've been doing that, and they've been helping me to be able to do that. So I really thank you, and thank you all for this beautiful gathering.
Thank you, dear. Thank you, Nita. And now we are officially
over time.
And would any of you feel like offering a closing prayer, or maybe we hear
a closing
each
statement
or
or a closing
or song or anything that is you feel called to? Daniel, you muted. Hold on 1 second. Yes.
I said I can get a brief closing statement out of the way, which is just if all the lateral reactions and opinions and how does it fit and what do I do and what do I not do get in the way for you, try to just stay focused on what's happening on the ground in your direct, immediate way of being with that. And let that move you to engage somehow tangibly. Pace yourself for the 500-year plan, but also engage somehow if you can. Your actions matter, your life matters. And, whether or not something landed from this time, like slow down around what brings you here and re-engage and engage if you can. It's going to be urgent for a while, but that we engage matters. That's mostly what I want to say. Thanks.
Yeah.
What I want to speak and close is simply an invitation, again, anew, to be in chant with me. May this violence cease. Let Gaza live and thrive in peace. May this violence, may all violence cease. Let Gaza live and thrive in peace. From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. With gratitude to all who are showing up, with gratitude for your presence, your prayer, and with gratitude to Sand and the many amazing sand weavers for hosting and inviting this conversation.
Layla, any last word or any last offer?
Yeah, thank you so much. I think that the invitation to really be present in our bodies, in our agency, in our resources, and to respond in the most practical ways possible right now is going to be a clarifying, kind of arrow and compass, and the invitation to, to respond from that place and to really find your agency every single day and not to look away, and not to get kind of swept up in the very intentional and strategic efforts to confuse you. These are very, very political. This is part of that spiritual warfare. It's part of this political warfare. So to just re-anchor into the practical, the simple, the basic things that we know and see from our hearts, like let that just continue to anchor you towards practical contribution to the people on the ground who are fighting for the most basic of things. And thank you all for being here and for the invitation to be a part of this. And don't forget your commitment. We are committing to completing these 3 fundraisers. There's hundreds and thousands of them, but just these 3. We're a pretty big group and we all have communities. So we're even bigger group. And thank you for taking that on together, because we don't have to have all these answers on our own. We have collective resources too. And so what one person can do in months, I know that all of us can do in hours or days. And send my love to Palestine, please, to the land. Kiss the earth for me, Neda.
Thank you so much for sharing so much wisdom, your beautiful hearts, and calling us for our humanity, to listen to our hearts and our humanity. Thank you for everyone who joined the conversation and the offering, and we will continue to gather throughout the months. And we have also a film that we will be releasing soon that Sand actually filmed in the occupied West Bank 2 years ago. So that will be released sometime in May. So stay tuned. We'll be sending an email with the recording, with all the resources, with all the links to the GoFundMe campaign, so we can all stay active and continue to support our brothers and sisters there and everyone who needs support. So thank you to the Send team for hosting the event. Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Jean-Ric.
Thank you, Stacy.
And until we meet again.
There's not many words to add. You touched, really, all of you touched my heart. So I'm honored to be in this space with each and every one of you, the 3 of you, and each and every one who is here as a community. So thank you. Let's continue our work together. And we are doing enough, and it's not enough. It's irrelevant. Let's do what we have to do. And it's not this enough is a capitalist idea. More is better. Is what's right. Let's do what's right. Let's do each step of the way. Let's follow our heart and be led. So, thank you.
Thank you, everyone.